Well, good afternoon. I want to thank Minister Phillips for delivering an outstanding budget. And I'm going to repeat that, it's an outstanding budget. It's a comprehensive and thoughtful plan to chart our path forward as a province. It's a $45 billion plan that will protect our healthcare system, support people and communities and businesses, and lay the foundation to recover our economy. It includes more money for healthcare, supports for people and businesses, tax relief, infrastructure investments, skills training programs, and so much more. Our government is sparing absolutely no expense in the fight against COVID-19. We will be there for our hospitals, our long-term care homes, our mom-and-pop shops and businesses, our mayors, our families, students and seniors, and everyone. What our province, what our army of 14.5 million people have been able to accomplish by working together has been nothing short of incredible. We built our testing network from absolute scratch, going from 4,000 tests a day to over 48,000 tests a day and leading the country in testing. We recruited and matched over 1,000 people to support our hospitals and long-term care homes. We delivered a $2.8 billion plan to fight the second wave of COVID-19 this fall and keep our schools and businesses open. Where no capacity existed before, we mobilized Ontario's manufacturing powerhouse to make millions of pieces of PPE right here in Ontario. Millions of surgical masks, gowns and gloves, and now N95 respirators and ventilators. By stepping up, these businesses are helping to ensure that we don't have to rely on any other country to secure the critical health supplies we need. We secured a $19 billion deal with the federal government, a deal that included $4 billion to support all 444 municipalities in Ontario and keep transit running. My friends, this same energy, this same drive, this same spirit, the Ontario spirit, that's what will take us through the coming months. Today's budget strengthens our healthcare system, protects and supports people and businesses, and starts us down the path to a strong recovery. And when the pandemic is over, Ontario will come back with vengeance, stronger and more prosperous than ever before. Now, Minister Phillips, I call him the architect, to deliver a few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Premier. In March of this year, when I introduced the first phase of Ontario's action plan, COVID-19 had only just become part of our daily lives. At that time, Premier Ford made a simple, non-negotiable promise to the people of Ontario. Your government will do whatever it takes to get you through this. This promise has not changed, and it will not change. Today, introduce the next phase of our government's response to COVID-19, Ontario's action plan, Protect, Support, Recover. It is a plan that provides us with certainty as much as is possible in an uncertain time, ensuring that we are always there to support those who need it most. Now, as any family or business owner understand, it's important to have a plan, especially amidst uncertainty. Our plan has three pillars: protect, support, and recover. First, we are taking steps to protect people from this deadly virus by increasing our health investments to $15.2 billion. Second, we are building on earlier relief to provide a total of $13.5 billion in direct support for families, workers, and employers, in addition to $11.3 billion in cash flow support. And third, we're removing barriers to recovery and providing $4.8 billion to protect and create jobs now and in the future. This next phase of Ontario's action plan brings our total COVID-19 response to $45 billion over 3 years. This budget is also unprecedented in that it includes three possible economic scenarios that could impact the trajectory of our recovery from COVID-19. We've done this because the people of Ontario deserve transparency about the public's finances, especially given these extraordinary circumstances. As time goes on and the impacts of COVID-19 begin to recede, so will the uncertainty. And I look forward to the day when the people of Ontario can, once again, see certainty in the long-term fiscal path, because that will be the day that COVID-19 is behind us. Protect is the first pillar of our plan. It represents our most fundamental responsibility. The people of Ontario have done and are doing their part by respecting and following public health advice. and we are doing ours. As COVID-19 continues to threaten our health, we will continue to be there to support and protect the people of Ontario. Support is the second pillar in our plan. COVID-19 has brought severe challenges and economic difficulties to families and employers. Since the beginning, we have promised to be there to help those struggling the most, and today we expand that support. COVID-19 continues to create challenges and will continue to be there to support the people of Ontario. Recover is the third pillar of our plan. It's about direct actions that help get through today while also providing hope for tomorrow. As we all deal with the day-to-day anxiety and impacts of COVID-19, it may seem ambitious to talk about recovery. But someday, hopefully soon, COVID-19 will fade, and every government in the world will be focused on recovering from the economic crisis caused by the pandemic. We need to start working on recovery now. There are long-standing structural barriers that we know, without action, will prevent the growth necessary for job creation and a full recovery. They existed before COVID-19, but what was a strong headwind for job creators then could prove a hurricane impossible to overcome in the post-COVID-19 world. Failing to act today will cost the people of Ontario tomorrow, so we're not waiting to act. As COVID-19 continues to cause uncertainty in the global economy, we will continue to provide support now and in the future. Now we are happy to take your questions.
Okay, we'll go to the phone line. Just a reminder, everything is under embargo until the minister begins his statement in the legislature. We will keep this teleconference line open for the opposition response. So stay on the line and you can enter, press star 1 to enter the queue and press star 2 to exit. We will go to the first question.
Thank you. Thank you. The first question is from Robert Benzie at the Toronto Star.
Hi, this is for the minister, not the premier. I noticed that you've revived the Healthy Homes Renovation Tax Credit, which the Liberals had in place before, but it expired in 2016, in part because it expired in part because people didn't subscribe to it enough, but it was only worth 15% of costs. Do you think that increasing the threshold to 25% will get more uptake from seniors?
I think this is a different time. I think the fact that it's 25% will make a difference to seniors. I think the fact that people are realizing now more than ever how vital their homes are, and of course how vital it is for seniors to be able to be safe in their homes. So the fact that it is 25%, the fact that it's a credit and it will be available not just for people who pay taxes and seniors who pay taxes and others. And the third point, Rob, is that it'll also be available for families that have a senior in their home. I know in my riding of Ajax, there are many, many multi-generational families where there's a grandma or a grandpa who's living there, and just this little bit extra bit of support, whether it's for a wheelchair ramp or stability bars, could make the difference to keep that senior in their loving family home. So yes, we expect it to be highly subscribed, and we certainly hope it will be.
Follow up?
And yeah, and on a different note, this year's budget, or I guess it is this year's 2020 to 2021, it's a $187 billion spending plan. But next year's plan, which you're going to introduce before March 31st, according to the documents, is only $183.4 billion, and then $186.3 billion in the following fiscal year. Are you being optimistic in saying that you'll be able to spend that much less next year? I've never seen an Ontario budget go down, but of course we never really had a budget that went up as much as this went since last year's by Mr. Fideli.
Yeah, so it's a great question. This year we have $8 billion in dedicated pandemic spending, and of course we are planning for the next years as well, but we'll have $4 billion in the next year and $2 billion in the year after that. So we are planning for the future to make sure that we have what's required, and I say we're being very prudent in that planning. Of the $45 billion, as you know, about 1/8 of that money was from the federal government. About $4 billion of that $8 billion in the additional health spending are dollars that came through our own contingencies, and $4 billion from the Fed. So we're actually planning for the same level of contingency, and I think that's prudent. But we do expect that we're going to be able to be more planful this year. We understand things about the virus. We understand the things about its effects on our community, and so we'll be able to be planful going forward. We really just don't know how long this situation is going to last. We, of course, hope that COVID will be gone soon, but we don't know that. So we're planning quite prudently for the next several years.
Next question.
From Colin DeMello at CTV News.
Hi there, good afternoon. My question is for the Finance Minister. Minister, on the electricity cuts for businesses, so it looks like taxpayers are the ones who are going to be subsidizing the cost of electricity for businesses. I'm just wondering, why would you choose that? Why should families be burdened with this cost when we're not really getting the benefits?
Well, this cost on business is costing us jobs, and it's costing us, or would cost us, the opportunity for the full economic recovery that we need. So yes, over 3 years, there'll be $1.3 billion of additional cost. Of course, this is a 19-year plan, and as those unnecessary contracts, and I know that all of you know those are contracts that were entered into by the last government with the Green Energy Act, were repealed by that act, but these are the legacies that are making our businesses uncompetitive. This will move our businesses not just to being competitive, but to being very competitive, particularly in the Great Lakes states. I mean, somewhat a coincidence. There's a quote in the budget from the president and GM and general manager at General Motors. And of course, the announcement today was great to hear, but talking about the problem of electricity and competitiveness right here in Ontario. So we're taking care of that problem, and we're going to see businesses return to Ontario and businesses expand in Ontario because we have competitive electricity pricing. So this is a very important investment. Obviously, it is a plan that takes a number of years, but of course, it took a generation for this problem to be caused, and it'll take some time to fix. But right away, starting January 1st, our employers, our businesses, our job creators will see that reduction. 14% for the commercial sector, 18% or 16% for the industrial sector.
Follow up?
I wanted to ask about the hospital system. This budget gives the hospital system just $200 million in each year for 3 years to help with the increased demands. Many would argue that that's an inadequate amount of money to deal with the pressing and current challenges. Why so little? Why $200 million per year? Why not increase that threshold higher?
Well, growth in the health sector will be in the neighborhood of 3%, and then just over 2% the second year. So you're going to see significant growth there. There's another $2.5 billion for hospitals this year, and in the budget you would have seen $571 million of new money to make sure that we're supporting the needs they have now. Obviously, in this year, hospitals and all the teams at our hospitals, and I should say thank you to those teams, have done a great job supporting us during this pandemic, and that's again why we've put those additional contingencies into the out years. So we will have the resources to make sure we can do what we need to do to protect Ontarians, including supporting our hospitals.
Next question.
From Richard Southern at 680 News.
Hi there, Minister. Good afternoon. We've heard from a lot of Ontarians about premiums for auto insurance going up. We've heard from restaurateurs about their premiums going up. Now, I see here you're allowing credit unions to sell auto insurance, but why did you not do more to try and legislate those premiums lower, Minister?
Well, we are carrying through on the plan that was first launched in our original budget around making the insurance market more competitive so we can affect drivers' rates. But I have to say, this is the government that took on the auto insurers and got $1 billion in savings, and that was recorded and verified by FSRA, the independent organization that oversees insurers. So that was $1 billion in savings because we knew that people weren't using their cars as much, and we said so, and we told the insurers that needed to happen, and that's what happened. Also, as recently as last week, working, and the Premier and I had quite a fulsome meeting with the leaders of the insurance sector about the challenges around commercial insurance. And you would have seen last week the Insurance Bureau of Canada and its large members come out and say they've now put a plan in place to help restaurants, to help condominium owners, to help others. So this is going to be an area of continued focus, but we've seen good progress so far, not enough progress, but we will continue to press on that. We know it's an issue, and we know that particularly during COVID, these insurance companies need to do the right thing. We were glad to see last week that they came forward after the conversation that the Premier and I had with them.
Next question.
I just wondering as well.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Thank you. Just wondering, Minister, as well, as far as alcohol sales are concerned, I see here in the budget that there will be amendments as far as retail stores and permits are concerned when it comes to the sale of alcohol. Does that mean your government will allow spirit sales in grocery stores or measures like that to try and increase spending, Minister?
Those changes are really around updating and continuing to update the out-of-date alcohol legislation. We're also going to make permanent the change that we've made for restaurants to be able to serve alcohol when it comes to takeaway food orders. Again, these are things that are very helpful to the restaurant industry, and we all know that restaurants are struggling right now, and that's been a real help to them. But we will continue to look at changes that make the alcohol sector more modern, to give adults in Ontario the kinds of choices that are available in other jurisdictions.
Next question.
Is from Sean Jeffords at Canadian Press.
Good afternoon. The first question actually is for the Premier. Wondering if the government is truly committed to establishing this 4-hour standard of care, long-term care, if there aren't actually costs attached in the budget.
Yeah, we're totally committed to make sure that we have 4 hours of care, and I'll pass the question about the budget over to the finance minister, but we do have to consult with the stakeholders right across the board, no matter if it's the PSWs, the nurses, the actual homes themselves, but we are 100% committed because we know the system was broken. We know the pain that families had to go through, and we're revamping the long-term care system, be it the quick builds, as we say, or putting air conditioning into all long-term care facilities. But this is what we're going to stand on with the 4 hours of care. We're going to set the gold standard in North America for this, and people will be following suit. I'll pass it back to the finance minister.
Yeah, so the funding is and will be available for 4 hours of care in long-term care. We'll be getting the staffing strategy in December, as the Minister of Long-Term Care has said. I've spoken as well to my counterpart, the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister. You might have seen that the Federal Immigration Minister talked about immigration targets. We've started the conversation about the important role that some targeted immigration can play. We're talking about tens of thousands of people that need to be trained, and we'll be setting metrics. So this is not something where we're going to wait and then 4 hours of care is going to happen. This will happen every year. There will be progress. We will lay out what that progress is expected to be. But as you can appreciate, this really historic, again, first in Canada decision to make this move, this is going to involve working with labor, working with the professions involved, working with the homes involved, working with our training institutions, making the determinations about the right calibration of staff, making sure that those people are coming through. This sort of additional dollars that we put into PSW wages earlier this year, a very important part, making these jobs attractive. So we shouldn't underestimate the complexity of this, but the money will be there to pay for it, and this will make so much difference. We talk about the quantity of care historically. We've talked about the number of beds, and we have an important commitment to building 30,000 beds as well. But the quality of care, this, if something can be more important than getting the beds, it's making sure that the people in those beds get the support they need, and we're going to see it happen.
Follow-up.
Minister, I wanted to just touch on this. Obviously, you put a lot of thought into this program. You're going to do a lot of consultations. You're talking about how sweeping it will be. That will have, I would presume, sweeping implications for the budget and costs going over the next 4 or 5 years, however long it takes to implement this. So why would the government choose to not have any of the cost details in this document?
Yeah, well, this is an announcement that we're making in this budget. We received the recommendation from the Associate Justice 2 weeks ago. And this is something that has to be done planfully, but it won't be done in 4 or 5 years. It'll be done in 4 years, and the financing will be there to support it. But everybody would understand that we have to make sure that it's done in the right way. And so that's going to take a lot of hard work and a lot of partnership with the key parts of the sector to make sure that we are educating enough people, that where is necessary, we are using immigration policy cooperatively with the federal government to bring in people to support this work, where we are making sure that the pay levels and others are there. So this is a complicated project, but it's something we're dedicated to. The Premier has said it's going to happen, and it'll happen.
Next question.
From Mike Crawley at CBC News.
Hi, a question for the Premier. A bit more about the not just the electricity price subsidies to businesses, but there's also a bunch of tax measures in there that are going to, reduce revenue into the Treasury, property tax cuts for businesses, and cutting the employer health tax, or at least making a bigger exemption for the employer health tax. how do you justify all of this tax relief to businesses when there isn't, as far as I can see, anything in the way of tax relief for regular workers?
Well, I'll address the business tax. I'll give you one example. The BET, the business education tax, was unfair to so many jurisdictions, especially like London, for example. They were trying to compete, and everyone had different education tax rates, so that was unfair, and we're leveling that and hopefully saving jurisdictions up to 30%. What we have to do, Mike, we have to create the environment for companies to come here rather than leave our province to other areas south of the border. We want them to stay here. We want them to expand. A great example today is GM, and I got to thank Jerry Diaz for the great work he has done. But as the finance minister said, as they were leaving out the door a while ago, they were saying, how can you be competitive with the electricity costs that we're facing here in Ontario? I didn't hear it just from them. I heard it from endless and endless companies. So we're trying to create that environment for companies to come here. You'll be able to hire more people. Therefore, we're going to create more revenues into the coffers of the province. And that's our philosophy. I believe it's going to work. And when businesses are thriving and paying more taxes, people are being hired, paying more taxes. So it's a trickle-down effect.
Follow-up?
And then perhaps it's the finance minister to answer this question. The COVID money that is allocated for healthcare, it looks like it's $8.3 billion, but $5.3 billion of that is in a contingency fund. What is any of that money actually allocated for spending? And is it possible that none of that $5 billion is actually going to get spent this year? I guess I'm trying to see whether you guys are making it look like you're setting aside more money for healthcare than is actually going to be spent.
Yeah, and great question, thank you. And the use of contingency funds, it's something that we innovated in terms of our March statement, and frankly, every government in Canada has followed along on that approach because when we need to get 300 million masks, when we need to get 900 million gloves, and we don't know that right now, that's how we were able to pay for it. That's how we were able to spend $1.1 billion on PPE. So that total contingency is now drawn down to about $2.6 billion in terms of the remaining contingency, and I'm comfortable with that because we are still 5 months left in this year. And I think it's been very important that we had, and these are the collection of all the contingencies, it's important that we have those dollars available so that we can adjust. We're in the middle of a second wave. But when the kind of challenges have come forward dealing with a global pandemic, we chose to use this way to be prudent, and so far that's made the difference. It's mean that we've been able to have the resources to spend. So I do believe that those dollars will get spent and deployed, and we'll be there to make sure that people have the resources they need, the healthcare resources, education resources, and again, every other jurisdiction in the country now, to the extent they've put out financial statements and has used the same strategy. So I think it's a strategy you can expect to see going forward. And in fact, in our case, you do, because we've got the contingencies as well. Not just the $4 billion, but also the people and jobs contingency, that's another $1 billion, effectively $5 billion of what I'd call special contingencies next year. And then that drops to $2.8 billion, $2 billion for that health contingency, but another $800 for people and jobs in the year after that.
Next question.
From Jeff Gray at the Globe and Mail.
Well, thanks. Yeah, just picking up on that, the opposition has been saying for weeks, they use phrases like penny pinching and so on, and I know your response to that will be, this is a record budget for spending, record deficits. But there does seem to be a disconnect with announcing money and the money actually getting where it needs to go. I mean, we heard from the Hospital Association just a few days ago about how hospitals haven't gotten money that they were expecting, and anyone who got a test about a month ago was waiting so many days for the results and so on. Is there anything you're doing to ensure that the money you're announcing is getting where it needs to go quickly?
Yeah, that is a great question, Jeff. The Premier and Peter Bethenfalvey, the President of the Treasury Board, and I have always been discussing the need for us to move not at government speed, but at COVID speed. Now, of course, there's another $570 million in here for hospitals today, and I mentioned that'll be $2.5 billion more than last year, and they absolutely need it with the challenges they're facing. But we are always working day in and day out inside government to make sure that those dollars dollars get moved. And I know the Premier's phone lights up, and mine, and Minister Bethenfalvy's. People need the dollars to spend. But our partners, I think we are doing a good job, but we listen. It's a lot of dollars going out the door, and we need to make sure that they get to the right place. And I think we've done quite a commendable job of that so far, but we're not finished. We need to make sure it keeps moving, and it is always a challenge to make sure that in a big organization the resources get to where they need to be, and it's a challenge that I think we're up to.
Follow-up?
Overall spending, non-COVID spending, I think, if I'm reading the charts correctly, for health and education in particular, is quite flat. I know there's all these pressures, obviously, the government has with COVID-19 and the economy and everything else. But there are pressures there, and there are pressures in the health budget that are completely independent of COVID-19. But it seems like you're not able to address those. You're keeping both those budgets pretty flat if you strip out the COVID spending.
Well, health sector spending next year is up about just over 3%, 3.3%. The next year, about 2.4%. Just to talk about the health area first, I mean, it's one of the reasons that the Premier, along with all the other premiers, has put forward a major initiative, and there's an important segment in the budget, again, never happened before, talking about the Canada Health Transfer, and the push from all the premiers, led by Premier Legault and Premier Ford, to say we need to raise that up to 35% of total spending. So there's no question there's significant pressure in the health space, but we are also making sure that the dollars are there to support it. And then, of course, we also have the pandemic dollars. On the education side, I mean, we'll continue to see the education sector spending grow. Remember, that spending incorporates any wage outcomes that have happened from labor agreements that are now already worked in. So that's an important component, the biggest single component in the education space. And remember, we're still spending $13 billion, over $1.5 billion on capital next year, $1.9 billion the year after that, building schools. So there's quite significant growth on the capital side, as well as there should be, because we need to keep our schools, we need to renovate the schools we have, and we need to keep building new schools as our population grows.
This will be the last question.
From Travis Danraj at Global News.
Hi there, Premier. Hi there, Finance Minister. Sorry, I've got double phones going on here. Yeah, my question was on education as well. I mean, it's overall spending is going up very marginally over the next 3 years. How much money are you prepared to spend when it comes to this reopening plan, and how would you justify this small increase in the budget when it comes to education to parents who say, listen, we've got major concerns about the safety of schools when we don't know so much about the virus and what's going to happen next?
Yeah. So, Travis, you mean a further reopening plan in a future? I mean, we have our $1.3 billion reopening plan, I think the most comprehensive, and I know Minister Lecce has talked at length about the details of that, so I won't go into them, but that support for this reopening, obviously we'll need to make sure, and part of those contingencies related to health, obviously some of that, for instance, if we're hiring more public health nurses, as we hired over 600, that's the sort of thing that would be available through that contingency. And remember, we are also putting, you'll see, historic contingencies into the base budget as well. So in addition to the health contingency, in addition to the jobs and people contingencies, you also have a higher than usual baseline contingency and the reserves. So there's dollars available there. And if we go around into next year's September and we're still dealing with COVID, as we might be, then I'm sure again the Premier will be talking to the Prime Minister, and we'll make sure that any reopening that's required is funded. In the meantime, we are spending significant amounts on capital renovations. That is ongoing. And that includes, that $13 billion over 10 years is a lot about renovating existing schools to make sure that they are safe.
Follow-up?
Yes, I'm just wondering if you could talk on tourism about this staycation credit of 20% that you're exploring for eligible in-province travel expenses, and when that will become a reality and what expenses will be eligible.
Yeah, so we're going to work closely with the sector, but we wanted to send the signal today that there will be, and that 20% will make it the highest tourism tax credit of any of the provinces in Ontario. But we wanted to make sure that the tourism sector knows that we are there to support them, and that we will make when it's safe, 2021, the year of the Ontario staycation. There's, as you all know, so much to see in Ontario. And this is an approach that has worked very well in other jurisdictions during other challenging times. Some of you will remember France were one of the innovators of this during the 2008-2009 term, where they were able to take all of those, in those cases, French people, in this case it would be Canadians who might typically travel down south or to other locations, and let them really enjoy what Ontario has to offer. So we will make that tax credit available, and we will do that in partnership with the tourism sector so that they can build their promotional materials and campaigns on that. But obviously, right now wouldn't be the time to do that because we are in the middle of a second wave. So we'll need to coordinate that with public health. But I think it'll be a powerful tool, and I think 2021 will be the year of the Ontario staycation.
Jamie's just going to ask a question from the floor.
Sure.
For the Premier, yes, please. Uniford just hit the trifecta. They've signed deals with Ford, Fiat, and just this afternoon, General Motors. How many jobs does it mean, and what's the ripple effect with jobs in the community?
Well, I think it's a great announcement, and again, I want to give credit where credit's due. Jerry's done an incredible job. I spoke to him last night, congratulated him, and the province is there like we have been for Chrysler and along with Ford. But what I understand, it's approximately 1,700 jobs. And the other part is that I don't know was mentioned, probably was, I didn't see the press conference, but is St. Catharines too, the St. Catharines facility for GM. So that's really, really exciting news. And we're going to be the strongest. We're going to be the capital of car manufacturing anywhere in North America. We're leading the charge with the battery cars moving forward. But I want to just mention Parliamentary Assistant Stan Cho. He was one of the architects. We got the main architect behind me, the Minister of Finance. But I have to tell you, he's an absolute all-star within our caucus and our team. And I just want to thank Stan for all the hard work and the endless hours he has put in to this budget alongside with the minister. This is a great news budget for the people of Ontario, the businesses of Ontario, and it's one of those budgets that you can sit there and say we're helping everyone right across the province. So thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. If you can just stay